And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at Vampire the Masquerade Heritage, a legacy game. Now, Vampire Masquerade, very popular. I know there's a role-playing game, and there's a lot of lore and history behind that intellectual property. I want to be really clear, I don't know any of that. I'm not even a huge vampire fan, but I know that some people like vampires, and there is that. The legacy thing attracted me, but what really brought me in was when I opened up this game and looked at all the stuff inside, I thought, wow, this looks fantastic. The idea of taking your own vampire clan and slowly changing them over the course of a legacy style game was pretty interesting. Also, the game comes with a basic game, right? You don't even have to play through the legacy. You can just play through the basic game. So I have played the basic game, and I've also even started a little bit of the legacy, enough that I think I can give some thoughts on the game. But before we do any of that, let's take a cursory look at how the game works. Folks, I'm not going to be able to go over every facet of this game. There's a lot of variety, but I can tell you the basic gist of the game. There's going to be a bunch of vampires out here, and each vampire has different statistics on them. You'll notice this one is green, blue, and brown. It shows those different symbols on them. And this one here has a wild symbol down here, and a green, a yellow, and that wild symbol. They're also part of a faction of vampires. Now, those symbols are going to refer to three essentially mini games. And these mini games are going to be different. If you're playing just the base game, you're going to, you can pick any three of them. But if you are playing, well, you have to pick three different ones because they correspond to those three different symbols, but they have different sides to them, and so you can pick various mini games. Each of these has another side to it, and they're going to basically determine your scoring. The game is going to take place over a certain number of rounds depending on players, and on your turn you are going to be drafting one of these. Now, you can always take one of these three over here. This one will cost you a power token. This one will cost you 3 power tokens. See, each person starts with their own vampire clan, and this is your leader here. They have 3 power. Power's worth victory points at the end of the game, but you can spend it to get those people in those spots that are harder to get. You also have these tokens here, which you can use, and you have a starting hand of cards. Each player has their own deck of cards corresponding to their clan. There are quite a few clans in this game. These are starting cards that you can play, and I'll talk a little bit more about them in a bit. But when you draft someone, you're going to basically make that person one of your children. That person can have other children, and you're going to use these to form groups. Now, as I said, when you draft somebody, you're going to look at the symbols that you have, and you're going to, each of these 3 mini games is going to be adjusted accordingly. So let's take a look here, for example. So the first mini game that we have out here is called the War of the Princes. And when you do this one, you're going to look at the bottom symbol here, and you're going to take a piece and move it out onto the board, or move it off the board. You can move it to any space that's not occupied. So I can move another one here, for example, and the next turn move one there. And what you're trying to do at the end of the game is to have whichever one of these has the most. Let's say brown has the most on the board, then every vampire that has that brown symbol in your family is going to get 2 points. Over here on the Beast Within, whenever you get this, you're going to look at the blue or yellow symbol there, and then you're going to look at your token. So let's say I'm the Cross Swords clan, and I draft a vampire with blue. I look, am I blue? Yes, then I'm going to move up on here. You want to move up as far as possible so you get points rather than losing points. If the color does not match, you flip it over and then move it down. But then next time, hopefully you get yellows and you can start moving up again. But anytime you take one that's the other color, you flip it over and move it down. And then finally, the last mini game here, for example, is basically just a tug of war. When you get red, it moves into the red spots. If you get green, it moves into the green spots. If you get it all the way to the end of one of these, then every vampire of that color gets a power token placed on them. Otherwise, and then it gets reset to the 0. Otherwise, at the end of the game, you just look where it's at, and it's going to be 1 or 2 points for every vampire that is red or green, depending on where it is. Now, the vampires that you take will be replaced, and so new ones are going to come out with various different symbols on them. And if you are playing through the campaign, you'll have some come out that may have special abilities on them that you'll be able to use, and you can have your stickers and things to change those. Now, like I said, you can also go out on a mission. You have your own missions that you're going to be able to do from your hand, and there are also missions that are put out based on the little mini games that you are playing. Like if you're playing The Beast Within, you have Explore the Ways of the Beast. And you're going to be setting up a group, and you'll pick a group of vampires led by one person and everyone underneath that group. You need to have the different symbols on the cards that match that, and then you get the bonus tokens or different things. You can activate them and make that battleground. Like I'm calling them mini games, but they're called battlegrounds. You can activate that. There's just different things you can do. Like for example here, I can remove, if I play Transgress, which needs these 2 symbols and then one other symbol, I can remove an exhaustion token. These are worth -1 point at the end of the game from each yellow vampire in my bloodline. And then I can draw a new clan scheme for each of these that's removed. So I can get rid of some of those and then draw some more from my pile. After a certain number of turns based on the players, and you can see the track right there next to the board, you'll end the game, and players will score based on the different battlegrounds for each of their vampires. But also, there's going to be some of these out here, some missions, basic missions here for an ordinary game, but depending on what scenario you're playing, there can be other missions included. And basically here it says, whoever has the most green, their clan leader is going to get 3 power. The most yellow, the most of these symbols. Those are very basic, but there are other ones out that will change things. Now, if you're playing through the campaign version, you're going to have a sheet where you'll write your name. You're going to slowly move up here in kindred and subterfuge and cruelty and all different things, and get discipline masteries and assets and things like that. You're going to have your own envelope. You're going to have different vampires that answer to you and only you. And you'll have whole sheets of stickers here that you'll be able to add to these vampires, but to add them, you're going to need to be moved up on these different tracks on here. So then you'll need to be high on those tracks to be able to get these stickers to put them on the different people. And you'll be able to stick some of these characters in the main deck, and they work with you. You have ways to put your own stickers to claim these different people. And there's a whole kind of legacy box where there are cards that are going to come out with different missions and different things for each game. There is a lot of pieces in this game. It's going to take a lot of sorting out. I even have a lot of pieces that are not punched out here of the different tokens, because I have these nice little upgraded tokens. These are nice. I have these wooden tokens here. If you like this theming, I think you're really going to like it. I mean, the art, and we can just take a look at the art on these cards. It's very evocative. All different kinds of vampires and more are going to show up through the different cards. This is not a theme that I'm in love with, right? It's kind of gruesome and dark, but they do a good job here. In fact, for whatever reason, in my set, I even got a bunch of giant pictures of all these, so if you really like how they look, you can put them up on the wall. The rule book is okay. I mean, it teaches you the basic rules of the game, has some key terms, talks about each of the clans and a little bit about their special powers, and then also talks about each of the battlegrounds and how they work at the end. But I had to go look up some things online. I found that there were things that I didn't think they explained very well. But there is a lot, and understanding these little mini games is going to be critical to how you play throughout the game. This one's a weird one for me. So you got to realize that I'm going into this with this theme actually is almost repulsive to me a little bit. I don't know. There's just something about vampires that I'm not a big fan of. But whatever. I can get over that. Yes, you're collecting vampires. And that idea of there being 3 mini games is really interesting to me. And I got into that, and it's fun. Except in retrospect, it loses a lot of the fun for me. And the reason for that is, on your turn, You have 3 vampires that you're picking from. Okay, yes, you can pick the other ones, but you have to spend power tokens. That's victory points, so they better really do well for you, and you may or may not have power tokens. But you have to spend those power tokens to get those. So even at best, you have 5 choices. You are usually looking for a perfect combination. I want the yellow one to move it this way, I want the red one to move it this way, and I want this symbol. That combination may not be there. If it is there, that's the one you take. That's a problem I have with the game. It's obvious choicing. You do that. If the perfect one isn't there, you take the second best one, which would be 2 matching symbols that you want. And then if none of those are there, you take the one that hurts you the least because you have to take one. That's problematic. Now, I wonder, and I look through all the legacy stuff to see if once they have all these special abilities, does that change and stuff? And it will a little bit, but that base conceit of the game, which is take someone and then move different things, the minigame sounds cooler in theory than it did in practice. In practice, it was like, oh, that's the perfect one for me, I'll take it. And since that's like a good chunk of your turn. The other chunk of your turn, which is putting together, and you'll notice, if you're a fan of this IP, and I apologize, there's a lot of wording and stuff in here, which I've deliberately avoided because I don't know how to pronounce any of it. But you put together this group, they call it something else, vampires, and go out and do these missions. They're not exciting missions. These cards you have, and then when you do some stuff, there's some pretty strong take that in the game. Like I can exhaust one of your vampires, making them worthless, making you have negative points. And in a game that's this grandiose, but also small, it's kind of weird. The game feels small, but then you have this big legacy thing behind it. That's just not as exciting. Then I got to look up the rules all the time. What does this symbol mean? What does this terminology mean? What does this mean? The legacy gives me some problems too, because you're moving up. At the beginning of the game, you get to pick an ability, you get to pick one of these masteries that you do, and you're following these, and based on the ones you pick, you're going to get to take stickers and put them on cards. There's only a few stickers for each of these, which means if I decide to do Kindred, I'm essentially saying, you better not do Kindred, because if I put the sticker on my card first, you won't have the number to put that Kindred on your own. And I found that very problematic. You just have to pick, you have to deliberately pick different things than other people pick, which is something I do anyway when I play these games, because I don't want to do the same thing someone else does. But also, it's just a weird gaming choice I found. I really think fans of Vampire the Masquerade are actually going to like this. The legacy thing doesn't appeal to me because of how slowly it moves. You play the same 3 scenarios, I think 3 times in a row, and then you move to the next scenario, and you are making the slightest changes, adding a few things in between. You're playing this a lot. I almost want to say it's not a legacy game at all. It's more of a campaign game. You're just upgrading your abilities as you go through it. I will happily say at least there is that base game that you can play, and it's just a simple game of going back and forth. But the simple game doesn't meet the price point and all the pieces that are in here. I think you shouldn't get this unless you want that whole legacy game experience. So, this is a mishmash here, right? I like the idea. I had an okay time playing it, but I don't want to play it anymore. Yes, partial theme, but I would have bowled through that vampire theme and even gotten into it if the game had drawn me more into that. I just feel like the number of rules compared to the actual gameplay isn't that fantastic. Like, oh, you do this, I take this card, now I got to look at 6 different rules and things, and how does all this work? And I'm essentially moving, done. That's my turn. And that's not that exciting. And sometimes it feels like, oh man, the cards that are out there don't match what I'm trying to do at all. So this turn I have to take a bad card for me, which isn't going to help me much at all. And that's 1/8 or 1/9 of the game. Not as exciting. So I think the game has a lot of problems. I think those problems will be glossed over or not a big deal to people who like the theme. But I think to board gamers, which I would imagine is a good chunk of the people watching me, this is not one I think that feels fully functional and fully put together. It's a good try. It looks pretty. There's a lot of nice ideas behind it. I just think it needed another pass of development to make it a really cool game that I want to go back to more and more. So that's Vampire the Masquerade Heritage. I'm Tom Vasel. and you've been watching the Dice Tower. Dice Tower Judgment, interesting, lot of ideas with flaws.